Takedosh Boker Or Beki'im Halakha 7, Siman 168, Kuf Samechet. We are on day 9. It's page 18, Halakha Kaf. Okay? We're now going to speak about sweet hallah. Yesterday we spoke about whether it's going to be the lahmajin and then the dough, because we switched from the filling to the dough. And now we're going to speak about sweet hallah. So based on the previous halakha, Sefardic Jews must say berakhot mezonot on sweetened hallah bread. This hallah cannot be used for the 3 Shabbat meals unless you're going to eat an entire volume of the hallah, which is going to be 216 grams. Okay? Therefore, if a Sefardic Jew is a guest of Ashkenazic Jews and they serve sweetened hallah, he has to say mezonot and then men shalosh afterwards, following the rulings of Maran. If it's Shabbat, so then the guest should bring his own ordinary hallah to host, right, to his host's home in order to fulfill the mitzvah of eating genuine meals on Shabbat with hamotzi mikad. He may use a sweetened hallah as the lechem mishneh without any problem. So let's go. There's a lot of footnotes today. We're going to start as follows. Number 1, 230. Okay, everyone look at footnote 230. Shulhan Arukh states that one form of the Haba'a Bekhisanin is the dough, in which honey, sugar, oil, or spices have been added, as long as the flavor of the additives is noticeable. Maran deduces from the Rambam. You remember that the second shita, which is opinion B, is the Rambam. That he ruled as long as additive is mixed into the dough and is noticeable, the product becomes Haba'a Bekhisanin. The Rama argued on the Maran. If you remember, according to the Rama, you needed the majority not to be water. Okay? So he says that Rama disagreed with Maran's interpretation, argued that the common custom contradicts it, since on Shabbat Yom Tov, people recite hamotzi on heavily flavored breads. He ruled, therefore, that the product remains bread unless the flavorings are the main ingredients of the dough. So that means that's why you need more of the everything else other than the water. And he insisted that this might be what the Rama meant as well. The Rama then ruled that honey cake is definitely Haba'a Bekhisanin, since the main ingredients are honey and spices. If the flour is the main ingredient, however, it's considered, right, going to be bread, even though, right, if the sweetness of the additives is noticeable. The Bach stated that technically the halakha should be that as long as there's more flour than any other additives, there should be hamotzi, even if no water at all is used kneading the dough. Nevertheless, he admitted to the custom to say mezonot in such products. He concluded, therefore, that a devout person should eat these things in the middle of a meal. The Taz and Mishnah Berurah, however, rejected this position. They ruled that as long as there's more honey than water in the dough, the proper blessing is mezonot. In conclusion, if a baked product has more additives than water, it definitely calls for the blessing mezonot according to Maran and the Rama. But according to the Bach, it should still say hamotzi. If there's more water than additives, but their flavor is noticeable, again, according to Maran, it's mezonot, and according to the Rama, it's hamotzi. But Shulhan Letziyon ruled that according to Sefardic Jews, we have to say mezonot, just like Maran. What about the Birkat Hashem? The Birkat Hashem is going to come, and he's going to give an argument over here. Okay? What exactly is the argument that he's going to give? Rav Moshe Levi comes and he wanted to say that Sephardic Jews are allowed to say hamotzi on sweetened hallah. Why? He says as long as they're going to plan to eat the volume of a kabetza, it's going to be okay. He wanted to rule this from the Gemara, berakhot, daf mem aleph amud bet. By Haba'a Bekhisanin Rishonim, they said the reason why Haba'a Bekhisanin is mezonot is because usually they're not used for meals. There's as snacks. So since sweetened hallah is used as a meal, so therefore even Maran would agree that you say hamotzi mikad. To support it, Rav Levi also brings a ginav radim, also saying large wedding feasts that they usually use bread, basically using with oil and sesame. Technically, the bread should be considered Haba'a Bekhisanin, but nevertheless we do hamotzi mikad, even if we don't eat an entire meal's bread. So the reason he gives is that it has become customary to eat this bread together with other delicacies and cooked foods at the table. So Rav Moshe Levi came and offered a second proof to the position based on the Bet Yosef Dereke Moshe, that whenever the additive flavor is noticeable, you have to say borei mezonot. The Rama said, no, it's not true. Now, the Bet Meid and the Rav Chaim of Tzanz, they refuted the argument explaining that we cannot prove the halakha from people's conduct during Shabbat meals, and those meals, it's used as bread, which is mandatory, which that's a meal. So he says when eating the same product by itself, however, it's Haba'a Bekhisanin. So according to Sefardic Jews, right, then you could use sweetened bread according to this. It's obvious that the Rama did not agree with this, right, and that Rav Levi was not bothered by this. He explained that the Rama knew that the custom was to use sweetened bread, and therefore to switch to ordinary bread in the course of the meal. Therefore, he says there's no problem. Now, the Halakha Berura refutes this. The Halakha Berura refutes the position of Moshe Levi, and he says that according to Maran, plainly the Shulhan Arukh, when there's going to be additives in the dough and the flavor is noticeable, it's Haba'a Bekhisanin, and it's going to be mezonot. The Rishonim who adopt the position explain in great detail, since halakha changes in many situations. Nevertheless, none of them suggests that the proper berakhot is hamotzi when someone uses it as the main part of the meal, right? He says, if it would be true, the halakha is determined so much of the product's ingredients by the manner of which it is eaten, the poskim would have made this clear. Since poskim did not mention it, obviously it's doubtful that it's true. And the Sefardic Beracha also said the same thing. He doesn't take into account any custom of any culture or any era, right? But rather, we have the regular halachot. The fact is common for sweetened hallah to be used for Shabbat meals does not affect halakha. The practice is often promoted by Ashkenazic Jews, but again, Sefardim, they have this problem then. So the Rishon Letziyon also refuted this of the thesis of the Birkat Hashem. He cited Shlomo Mesas, who demonstrated that the logic presented in Birkat Hashem is faulty. He added that even if the Birkat Hashem might be correct, it's still doubt for us, and therefore again you would make what a mezonot. The Halakha Berura offers an exhaustive treatise on the subject, soundly refuting the position of Birkat Hashem. He showed that there's no proof from the Ginav Radim, nor is there proof from the Bet Meir or the Chaim Tzans. He says it's true from those Achronim that if someone uses the big product, he says as the bread, he must say hamotzi, but it follows the ruling of the Rama in the manner that they understood him. Sefardic Jews following Maran, and therefore, according to him, you have to eat 216 grams. Furthermore, the Halakha Berura argues that it's unlikely that people are going to be eating sweet hallah and also ordinary hallah in the middle of their meals, not like the Birkat Hashem. The Birkat Hashem offered another proof about matzah, which is dry and crunchy, and he says during Pesach it's hamotzi. The Halakha Berura said that's also not, because on Pesach there's no other food. So therefore, since there's no other bread, the matzah becomes the bread, and therefore, obviously, you make hamotzi. The Letziyon likewise ruled that if the sugar is added to bread, dough can be noticed. It's Haba'a Bekhisanin, and you have to say, but it was not the fact that the party celebrating a newlywed couple and sweetened bread was served. He instructed all those present to say borem mezonot, right? Much to the chagrin of the host. Obviously, he was very, very upset. But what can you do? What about relying upon a sveka? So he says that Letziyon wrote that certain Ashkenazic rabbi came to him and argued that a Sefardic Jew should say hamotzi since he's eating an entire meal at the time. Magid Avraham brought down Mishabura that if someone eats an entire meal, right, so therefore, right, it's already going to become a hamotzi. The Rishon Letziyon, he comes, it doesn't matter how much, but that's his meal. So Rishon Letziyon refuted this argument, showing that the Rav Chida, right, the Zichron and the Kavachayim all disagreed with this. They ruled that one can recite hamotzi over Haba'a Bekhisanin only if you eat the product of 4 eggs. The Ashkenazic rabbi counted that even if it's so, you could have a sveka. First of all, maybe the halakha is like the Rama. And even if the halakha is like Maran, maybe the halakha is like Magen Avraham, that you would still say hamotzi. But Rishon Letziyon rejected this argument as well, since the principle of berakhot applies even when there's a sveka to permit the blessings to be recited. In light of this, it says that Rishon Letziyon, that if Sefardic Jews is invited to eat by Ashkenazic Jews and he suspects the sweetened hallah may be served, he should bring along his own ordinary bread. Okay? So that's also very, very important. Let's continue. What about how sweet is sweet? But at the end of the day, what is considered sweet? So writing on a practical level, the Letziyon pointed out that it is possible to add sugar to bread dough, thus improving its flavor without becoming noticeably sweet. In that case, the correct blessing is still hamotzi. The breads marketed in Israel and labeled half-sweet hallah definitely taste sweet, and they should not be used for Shabbat meals. He warned the housewives who enjoy baking homemade hallah that they must make sure not to add too much sugar to the dough, for this would create a problem. Okay? Now he comes and he says, a devout person should avoid sweetened hallah in any situation. The Letziyon concluded, although the correct blessing is going to be borem mezonot, try to avoid it whatsoever. The Halakha Berura also recommended the practicing the stringency in deference to the Ginav Radim in the Bach. What about on the airplane? Okay, this is going to be the airplane. The Sefer Zot Beracha cited several leading American rabbis, right? And he says whether it's going to be Rav Rambik, Rav Reuven Feinstein, Moshe Stern, Rav Belsky, that the rolls served with airplane meals require hamotzi and katamazon, even if they're labeled borem mezonot. This is because the roll is used specifically as a substitute for bread, giving it the status of a meal. The companies that labeled this, they're making a mistake. Both Rav Shmuel Wozner and Rav Elyashiv concur with this. The argument of these rabbis matches the opinion of the Birkat Hashem. According to Maran, the Rishon Letziyon or the Letziyon, however, the fact that the roll is being used as a substitute for real bread does not raise its status as bread. As long as the sweet flavor of the rolls is noticeable, as is usually the case with those served in the airline meals, the correct blessing is going to be borem mezonot. Nevertheless, the offering person, right, should only eat it after you eat ordinary bread. The last one, 231. What about can you use it as lechem mishneh? So the Shulhan Arukh added this detail that sweetened hallah can be counted lechem mishneh as a parenthetical statement without explaining why this is so. Perhaps it's because since there's a sveka to argue that sweetened hallah is considered bread, So therefore, first of all, maybe the halakha in reality is like the Rama, and that is sweetened bread is hallah. And even if like the halakha is like Maran, perhaps the halakha is like Magen Avraham. Although there's not sufficient to permit us to say hamotzi, but it's sufficient to consider it as lechem mishneh. Have a wonderful day.